Welcome everyone. We're going to wait a couple minutes to let people make their way in, and then we'll make a start soon. Okay, we're going to make a start. Welcome everyone. Still be some more people filing in, but we're really happy to have such a great registration turnout for today's event. Before we begin, I'd love to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we are Zooming from today. And for myself and from our presenters there in Collingwood, you can see we're in the, we'd like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation. And we're grateful to be guests living and working on this land that has been cared for tens of thousands of years by Indigenous people. We give our respects to their elders past and present, as well as their emerging leaders, and acknowledge that first people in the lands. We also want to acknowledge the first people in the lands of our viewers zooming in from around the country and potentially around the world as well. Indigenous sovereignty has never been ceded. It always was and always will be Aboriginal land. I also want to acknowledge that this week marks the 15-year anniversary of what's become known in the Northern Territory simply as the intervention. So in June 2007, the federal government staged a massive intervention in the Northern Territory to protect Aboriginal children from sexual abuse. There was very little, if any, consultation with Aboriginal people, and Aboriginal people's lives were heavily regulated as a result of this, and many felt ashamed, disempowered and angry. And despite widespread protests, that intervention was extended until 2022. So as a team at Portable, working to ensure that we're creating real change with real people, we're committed to including the voices and views of Aboriginal people in the work we create that affects them. So a little bit of housekeeping first before we proceed. So this session is going to run with a presentation from us, including a demonstration of our toolkit, which we'll get to. And we may have some time towards the end for some questions and discussion. So in case this is your first Zoom webinar, you can post any questions you may have as they arise in the Q&A panel in the Zoom interface. We'll see how we go for time, and hopefully we'll have some time at the end to answer those questions. There's also a chat in there, which you'll see Olivia using at the moment. Feel free to use that and chat with each other as we present. Presenters won't be monitoring it, but Olivia, who I'll introduce in a moment, will be in there to help if anyone's having any difficulties. We also want to mention that we initially intended on making this an in-person event where we'd have an audience live at Portable in Collingwood with us, as well as broadcasting remotely. Due to the recent lockdown in Melbourne and some indoor restrictions still in place, we've decided to go for a remote event. But some of our team, we thought it would be nice to still have in the same space presenting, so you can see them there in the Dusseldorf atrium on the second floor of our Easy Street offices. That team will unfortunately need to be wearing masks throughout the presentation, and this might cause some accessibility issues for those who would prefer to see the faces talking. The recording of this webinar will also be published online at some point soon, and we'll include subtitles on that video. Okay, now that that's out of the way, I'm going to share a little bit about us at Portable. So we're a research, design and technology company. We're based in Collingwood, but we've got a distributed workforce around Victoria and the country. Our mission is to seek out areas of social need and policy failure and make transformational change using research, design and technology. So it's a lofty mission, but it's one that it drives a lot of the work that we do here at Portable, and feeds into what we're going to be talking about today. So what are we going to be talking about today? So inherent in that mission is the need to be solving problems for people in complex situations. So we create new digital products and services to help meet people's needs in areas like mental health, access to justice, and public services. However, we've often found ourselves reinventing the wheel, so to speak, when designing new interfaces and experiences. We're regularly having to start from scratch on foundations like typography, spacing, good component design. And this has led to inconsistencies from one project to the next and has made it harder for our designers and developers to share a standard language and practice. So we're going to run you through how we're solving this problem with what we like to think of as a design system for design systems that's custom made for our agency. And this is a standardized set of user interface, foundations, and components that exemplify best practice usability and accessibility and are grounded in research and evidence. So not only is this toolkit helping our cross-disciplinary team design and build more effectively, we can now use our time and energy designing experiences for the real problems that our users face. So in the spirit of sharing our practice, we're showcasing our UIKit today in a live discussion with the team that built it. We're going to start high level, talk about what problems this was solving for us, how we proposed the idea and built the kit itself. So there's a bunch of context before we do the big reveal, but then we're really going to geek out on a detailed demonstration of how it actually works, presented by the team who conceived of and built it. We're not sharing this because we want you to use our tool or because we think it's the best tool, but really because we want you to be inspired to tackle these kinds of problems in a similar way by collaborating with your teams. So here are the lovely people presenting today. Myself, I'm Joe, I'm the head of design here at Portable. To our left there in the Dusseldorf atrium, we've got Darcy Glennon, who's a developer. We've got Ashley West, who's lead experience designer.
Hello. And
Dan Holt, who's an experience designer. And just off camera, we've got Olivia Gregory, who is the producer that helped bring this to life as well. Hi, Olivia. So this is the team that helped conceive and build the UIKit, and we're really excited to have them presenting to everyone today. So before we get into it, at Portable, I want to talk about some of the ways we value working, and this really feeds into the problems that we're trying to address with the toolkit. So one of those things that we value is solving real problems for real people. So the people we're designing for and with are often in complex situations where they're experiencing some kind of vulnerability. It's rare that we have the luxury of coming to a problem where we can be like, oh yeah, we've seen this before, here's how we do this, and just apply some thinking that we've done before to it. Sometimes we're designing for a specific demographic of people with, say, ill mental health. Sometimes we're designing for victims of family violence. And sometimes we're designing for separating couples who are trying to agree to a parenting plan. And that's just a sampling of the kinds of experiences that people are going through when we're designing these digital product experiences for them. And because of that, it takes a lot of awareness and empathy to understand what people's experiences are, let alone to design a good user experience for them. The design problems we're solving are inherently complex, and creating better experiences requires the ability to embrace that complexity. One way of breaking down what makes a solution good is to look at it from two perspectives. One is how well we've understood the problem that we're trying to solve, and two is how well we understand what it takes to actually implement that solution. In our team at Portable, collaboration is really key to achieving both of these. Our experienced designers play a really strong role in solving those problems, and they rely on strong collaboration with both our design strategists, who uncover the needs we're solving for, and our technology team, who bring our ideas to life. So our solutions are only going to be as good as our understanding of the problem, as well as our understanding of what we're able to implement. And it takes really strong cross-discipline collaboration to achieve that. So that's a really strong value of ours. Finally, one of the ways we talk about the impact we want to have at Portable is for the services and experiences we design to exceed the expectations of citizens. This is more of the norm in the commercial world, but in the public sector and not-for-profit spaces, it's harder to come by. Clients in the sectors we work in, they often aren't afforded the benefit of product teams or regular release cycles. And sometimes investments in a digital product is a one-off. And it might be many months before there's scope for updates or improvements. So this means we need to be building in quality at the foundational level, getting our designers and developers to think about best practice, user experience, inclusive design, accessible interfaces and interactions, technical constraints right at the beginning of our work, not just waiting for the end as an afterthought. We always want to deliver quality no matter the space we're working in, but even more important, considering the people using our tools, is ensuring it's easy for our team to follow best practice and inclusive and accessible design. So these are some of the ways of working that are necessary in order for us to achieve that mission we spoke about and our clients' outcomes and our users' outcomes. But these are often hampered by some challenges. So one of them is unnecessary duplication. Every time we start a new project, we end up spending a lot of time setting up basic foundations like spacing, breakpoints, type systems from scratch. And we end up making new decisions about the approach we even want to take to these things or the techniques that we're going to use each time. For example, how should I set my grid up for this project? Should I ask the last team that did it? What you end up with is often this photocopy of a photocopy and some wasted time, really, trying to address those problems fresh. There's also time spent deciphering designs. So those who have worked with both designers and developers know that things can get lost in translation, and that often means multiple rounds of communication, changes to code, and visual testing in order to make sure things are represented the way they were intended. And that all amounts to a lot of wasted effort. Our team is learning stuff on each project that's not going to be useful for the next project or the next person because it's just simply applied to that one product. A lot of the research our team might conduct on best practice for components or foundations either stays with that team member or gets lost with that project. And referring back to other documentation or things like inclusive design and accessibility often it requires a lot of time as well. So these are solved problems for many in-house product teams. And what I mean by in-house is organizations that have their own design and development teams rather than contracting out to agencies like ours. They have the time and they're often working on single products. And so a typical in-house experience is that you've got that single product. You've also got a single design system, which for those unaware is a library of visual styles, components, and other elements documented by a team so that designing and building and adopting products can be more efficient and cohesive. You've also got that team working with the same stakeholders in the same organization. That in-house team is designing with the same brand. They're able to do continuous product improvement over time. And they're also able to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of their processes. So contrast that with an agency. Now, I love working in an agency, and I think everyone at Portable enjoys the benefits of an agency, like getting to work on a variety of projects, for example, but it's also got its shadow side. So every project is often an entirely new product. Every product often requires a whole new design system. There's new stakeholders with each project. There's a new brand with each project. Our clients are often making one-off product investments, so continuous improvement often isn't possible. And there's also staggered process improvements for our own team because we're constantly jumping from one thing to the next, and that sense of continuity of what we're building and how we're working often is difficult to translate into a consistent practice. And, you know, there's just ain't no time in an agency. The problems I mentioned earlier of wasted effort and duplication, you know, people in in-house teams, they have the conditions to solve these, and it's pretty unique to be able to take the time to look at these barriers and to be able to solve them in an agency. Typically, we've moved on to the next thing before we've had the opportunity to look at where we could make improvements. But we didn't take that as a reason to not try and solve those problems. And so what we want to present to you today is a bit of the journey of how we got there. So before we dive into the UIKit itself to show you what we did to solve some of these problems, we're going to take you through that journey of how this idea came to be, how we made it a reality within the context of an agency like ours, and hopefully inspire people who are in similar contexts to do the same. So I'm going to hand over to Ash now.
Awesome, thanks, Joe. So I'm just going to take you through, a little bit of, how we looked at solving these problems and the process that we went through. So let's firstly talk about what the UIKit is. So the Portable UIKit is a standardized set of UI systems such as typography and color and components such as buttons. And it's representative of our position regarding what is best practice in design and development, and it's based on decisions grounded in research and evidence. Now, some people may be thinking, hey, just sounds like a design system to me. It's not particularly new or exciting. But for us, because we work across designing and building solutions for many different organizations and products, we can't just have one design system. Otherwise, all of our stuff would look exactly the same. And it doesn't give us the freedom to design for different and complex problems. A design system is an articulation of decisions that have been made and rules about how to apply them. For us, our UIKit is a tool to help us make those decisions for each individual client and product that we're designing. Now I'm going to chat a little bit through the process that we took in terms of how we approached preparing a proposal and actually getting this project off the ground, and share a couple of tips and things that were actually important to us, and hopefully things that might be helpful to you as well. So the idea for the UIKit started from a number of cross-discipline conversations that were happening across the office. It's really, really nice to see that we have so many people in the team here at Portable who are really passionate about solving complex problems and looking at trying to improve the way that we work to create more time for solving those complex problems and collaborating. So those cross-discipline conversations were really key. The project would not have happened if it was just from the perspective of one team or one person. Cross-discipline collaboration and that drive to constantly be looking at ways to improve the way that we work really brought this project to life. Being able to show how it improves our work across multiple disciplines also made it a lot easier to propose this project and the approach and this idea to our senior leadership team. So I wanted to just share a couple of sort of key things or takeaways that, again, as I said, hopefully might be helpful for you if you're looking to tackle a similar problem in your organisation. So the first one for us is really treat it like a client project. Just because it's an internal project doesn't mean we shouldn't show it the same love and care that we do with our client projects. This project was fully scoped out and costed. We provided a clear proposal that showed exactly how we were going to achieve it, which gave our senior leadership team the information and clarity they needed to confidently approve and give this project the green light. It was also fully resourced with a cross-discipline team, including, most importantly, a producer, a lovely Olivia here, who ensured that this project ran smoothly. Here at Portable, nothing happens without our amazing production team, so this was really key. And secondly, we need to be flexible. We need to remember that we're an agency, so while these sorts of internal improvements are really important to us, we also, for us, our client projects are also very high priority. So we needed to put forward a flexible approach. We ran 8 two-week sprints, but these sprints were able to be extended to 3 or 4 weeks if need be to fit in and around other client project work. We also allowed 1 to 2 week pauses in between sprints when people were busy or on leave. This is a really fine balance for us to strike between creating a flexible approach, but also not losing momentum or having the project go on for months. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. Next, as with all of the work that we do here at Portable, and it's the same with this, we really needed to take an MVP approach. It was tempting to try and include as much as possible in our UIKit. But we really focused on what the key foundational elements were so that we could get something out there and get people using it and testing and iterating. This helped us to keep a really nice, neat scope to begin with, which definitely helped during the proposal stage. The next is remembering that these sorts of things are a living thing. Continual improvement and growth is key to not only evolving as a team within our different technical disciplines, but also as a business. The way that we approached this project and bringing this idea to life, the things that we were designing and building, we needed to fundamentally allow for continual improvement and iteration. And that really sort of guided our approach with a number of things. The next, particularly when we're talking about putting a proposal together and putting this forward, the most important part of the proposal process was articulating the positive impact across the entire business. Not just thinking about it as, hey, this will help me as a designer, but thinking about the broader implications around improving efficiencies, quality, collaboration across multiple teams and projects within the business. This is a level of strategic thinking that our senior leadership team operate from, and we needed to ensure that we could articulate our idea in this way. On that point, I'm just going to quickly throw to Andrew, who is one of Portable's co-founders and our CEO. just to quickly get his take on what he looks for with these types of internal projects and proposals in order to make a confident decision.
Thanks, Ash, and really loving the presentation so far. So just to give a bit of a context, when we're looking at internal proposals, and we have a lot of them come through our desk, we're actively looking at how we're going to gain new knowledge or develop new projects or improve processes. And I think this is a really good example of an internal project for a number of points. I think, firstly, the way it was presented, the use was around creating something that's really reusable. We often see, as Joe described earlier, a lot of waste, a lot of repeat work, which I think makes us all feel frustrated when we're working on projects, because we could see value if it was reusable. And the other point was really collaborative. Anything that brings together the technical team and the design team together to work on a project is always going to have a great success, and it is a great win for us. So we're looking for that. But I think, in particular, what was really great about this project and proposal, it was a really, really clear proposal at a really, really clear scope of work. So I think often when you're trying to motivate teams to or get things across within a team, you'll hear an idea that will generate, and people don't or may not know what to do with that, or what shape or form. What this team did was that they were very, very, very articulate. Like, we got a full proposal, everything mapped out, hours, time, scope of work. The team presented it to us, so they booked time in with the senior leadership team to present it. And that just really, really helped us to kind of say, yeah, this is a big tick. And obviously you're going to see in a few moments the results. So yeah, really, really great process to follow.
Great, thanks, Andrew. So now I'm going to share a little bit about what we actually built and sort of the approach that we took. So first of all, once this project was given the green light, we assembled a cross-discipline team to start working collaboratively. Each sprint focused on 1 to 2 different foundational elements of UI design, such as color or typography, where we had the space to conduct desktop research so we could ensure that we were making evidence-based decisions around our approach to each of those foundational elements. We also ensured that we were designing our tools and processes to allow for continuous improvement and iteration. As I mentioned before, that was really sort of a core mindset for us to have. And of course, make sure that we had clear documentation throughout, not only within the UIKit itself, which I'll show some of that in a bit, but also the tools and processes that around it that really help to support it. And we also look to leverage the existing tools that we were using. These are our tools that you can see here. You yourself may use different tools as a designer and even just within your organization. But these are the tools that we know and love, and we really wanted to leverage this existing tool set. So for us in the experience design team, Figma is our design and prototyping tool of choice. On the development side, React, which is a front-end JavaScript library for building user interfaces, is a common front-end coding language that we use across our products. Chakra, which is a React-based front-end UI component library, which actually forms the default of a lot of the stuff that's actually in our UIKit Figma file. Again, this all probably seems a bit out of context at the moment, but you'll see it all in action in a little bit. And Storybook, which is a tool that allows us to see and QA components during the development phase. So what did we actually make? The first thing that we made was the actual UIKit. So this is the actual reusable Figma file that contains our standardized set of UI foundations and components. We also built a Figma to theme tool, which is utilizing the Figma API, and it's a custom tool that extracts the design tokens from our Figma file and uses them to generate a theme on the code side. And we also built Easy, which Darcy's going to talk a little bit about, which is a scaffolding script which allows developers to get new projects up and running quicker than ever. And for us, the UIKit was designed to fundamentally lift the knowledge and standards across the entire team. So previously, this might have been happening in pockets based on different learnings and things that people were coming across as they were working on different projects, but it was never happening consistently across the team. This tool is a vehicle for us to now set a new baseline standard and then continue to grow our knowledge together as a team. So let's take a quick look at the Figma file and just run through a couple of key concepts before I hand over to Dan and Darcy, who are going to get stuck into a live demonstration. So this is basically what the UIKit Figma file looks like when you open it. We have an introductory section with some high-level documentation on this introduction page here, and you can see the different pages and sections over on the left-hand navigation panel. So one of the key things to point out that our MVP version of the UIKit at the moment focuses on the foundational elements of UI design. So at the moment we've got breakpoints, colors, grids, icons, radii, shadows, sizes, spacing, and typography. This gives the team a really strong foundation to build from while giving us the flexibility to design for different problems that we're trying to solve. It's also theme-based as well. So the defaults for each of these foundational elements relate specifically to the React Chakra UI library that I mentioned before, which helps to bring our designs more in line with the code base right from the get-go. For the next version of the UIKit, we'll be exploring specific UI components such as form fields and buttons. But for now, our MVP version is focusing on these foundational elements. We also have a lot of built-in documentation throughout the actual throughout the UIKit Figma file. So each of those foundational sections that I mentioned before includes documentation which covers general how-to. So each of the sections have specific guidance on how to use them, different naming conventions, those sorts of things. It also includes key foundational concepts such as how we're approaching type scales, color systems, those sorts of things. It also includes best practice UI UX design guidance, and we have a specific section for inclusive and accessible design practices, which you can see there. We have links to further guidance tools and different Figma plugins to help our designers. And we also have guidance around specific technical considerations that help a designer have the right conversations with their developer right from the get-go. We're also utilising design styles and design tokens within our Figma file. So we utilise design tokens in Figma, which allows us to name, describe, and consistently reuse certain values, whether it's colour, type, or shadow styles. Design tokens are the individual design decisions we have made, represented as data, which can then be used during front-end development. You can see here how we're using design tokens for our color system, where we specify a custom color and use a naming convention to give it a name. This is then pulled directly into the code base using the Figma to theme script and can be changed in Figma if need be, and then updated in the code base, which you'll see in the demo. It easily translates our design decisions into code to simplify the design to dev handover and to improve and simplify feedback loops. The UIKit has also given us the space to decide and document how we as designers at Portable do things. We now have a clear approach to the foundational elements of UI design, which helps to take the guessing work out and allows us to spend more time designing cool stuff. And this is now a consistent approach that's now across the entire team. Some of these decisions include how we approach type scales and responsive grids, as you can see here, and color systems and color scales, as you saw on the previous slide. Having these things clearly documented not only helps the current team, but also makes it will also make it easier for onboarding new designers into the team in the future. While the MVP UI kit doesn't include UI components yet, It does include some functional components for our UI foundational elements. So you can see here, we've got our spacing system. These are fully componentized and allows us to use them to annotate our screen designs and prototypes. So that's a little bit about the actual Figma file, but that's only one piece of the entire end-to-end toolchain process that we created with this project. So now I'm going to hand over to Dan Darcy, who are the lead designer and developer on the project, who are going to run through a demo of how everything works together.
Thanks, Ash. Yeah, so I'm just going to run through a demo that Darcy and I have prepared that really just shows how we might set up a new project with the kit and then apply the kit and put it into action in our actual designs. So as Ash touched on, we've got our master Figma file, and it's really important that we maintain that as a sort of single point of truth as far as iterating and applying everything that we learn every time we use the kit. Obviously, one of the crucial things is to be able to start to alter all of the defaults that are in the kit itself. But if we want to do that, then we really need to create a unique instance of the kit for the project, so that we're free to start to make those changes that are specifically for that project. So in Figma, we can jump into our master file and create a duplicate of it. And then really it's just, I guess, a couple of little housekeeping things, which is making sure that we name the file appropriately so that we are able to distinguish it easily from other instances of the kit. We're assuming that we're going to end up with a lot of these as we continue to work with it, and also to use Figma's project structure to move it to the project within Figma, and we can keep it alongside our other design files and keep everything nice and neat. So yeah, once we've created that unique instance, we're free to start customizing. And I guess a likely scenario is that we might be coming to a new project with maybe some brand guidelines. So we're probably going to know maybe some colors, at least some colors to begin with, and maybe some fonts, etc. So before we even start editing, if we're already comfortable with using the kit, we've made it really simple to remove those documentation objects that Ash talked about earlier and dive right in. So here's an example of us updating our secondary colors and creating a whole new full color scale for those secondaries. We're using a third-party tool here called Colorbox, which really speaks to what we talked about earlier about using the tools that we know and love already wherever they make sense in this overall process and tool chain. So Colorbox is a great tool for generating color scales, and it gives us the type of control over our accessibility rules that we've embedded into the approach to the UI kit, and makes it a lot easier for us to do that consistently. So naming is really important. Ash touched on earlier. We need to make sure that all of these objects are named appropriately so that the tokens can be extracted. But equally, we need to make sure that we've got styles that we've got set up properly in Figma. It's no good us having them unlinked from their values and each one being separately applied to designs. We need to be consistent in our designs so that we're consistent in our build. So once we've started making some changes, we might want to start applying those styles to some screen design, whether that be components or screen layouts. And in order to do that, what we want to do is we want to publish our UI kit as a library. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Figma, you're probably used to this if you've used other screen design tools in a similar way. But in order to be able to reference these styles from the kit, we need to publish it as a library. Once it's published as a library, it means in other Figma files, other design files, we can literally point at those values and apply them to our designs. Which segues me to applying these tokens and styles to our designs. So we've published our library, and now we might want to start creating our separate screen design files, doing that alongside the library, the UIKit library file. And all we need to do is enable that library in this file. And once we've switched it on, it means that all of those styles and components from the UIKit instance are available to us. So here's a really basic card component that I prepared earlier. And you can see this one, I've already applied type styles. You can see that this icon is pulling from our set of components from the kit library. And then you can see in our style browser, it's listing out all of the styles from the UIKit file itself, and we can apply all of those colors that we saw earlier when I was in the kit file, as well as things like shadow styles. So Ash touched on our spacing components. We've created a set of components that represent the values of our spacing tokens, but they also do a little bit more than that. Within Figma, it's not possible to use a token value to add padding or margins or spacing between objects currently. So we're able to use these objects as helper objects in some instances to make sure that our spacing is giving us the exact value that we want. But more importantly, we're able to use them as annotation objects. So what that means is that by laying these over our designs, our developers can come in and rather than needing to measure things and inspect the values, they can literally read the name off of those annotation objects and it will match the exact token name and value that they need. So once we've got all of our styles applied, tokens applied, and any annotation that's necessary, we're ready to hand over to developers. And it's really simple. It's just a matter of us grabbing a link to our UIKit file, our unique project instance, obviously, and sharing that with our developers. Well, obviously, as per most normal processes, need to let them know where our component or screen designs are as well. But those are the only couple of things that we need to send over to them. And so that's the point where I'll hand over to Darcy and he'll take us through what happens on the development side.
Thanks, Dan. As Ash mentioned earlier, we've also invested effort in empowering our developers and allowing them to get new projects up and running with the UIKit as fast as possible. So we've done this by creating a project scaffolding tool we call Easy, which I'm going to utilize now to set up a fresh project and showcase the developer workflow for the UIKit integration. So the name of the tool is a nod to our office on Easy Street in Collingwood, but it's also a nod to the fact that it's super easy to use. All I need to do to start my new project is run the command, enter a name and description for my project, and then enter my own name and email. So Easy is intended to solve a similar problem for developers as the UIKit is solving for designers. It allows our devs to get new projects up and running extremely quickly while providing documentation, sensible defaults, and all the tools they need to get working straight away. Easy and the UIKit both serve the purpose of being a foundation for new projects and subsequently a source of truth for portals best practices. Developers starting a new project with Easy will always be provided with the most up-to-date tools, documentation, and examples of what we as a team consider the best way to do things. And the same goes for designers starting a new project with the UIKit. So now that the project is up and running, I can view the generated homepage. So Dan has sent me a link to the UIKit file for my new project, and Easy has provided me all the tools necessary to hook it up straight away. So I'm going to jump in and do that now so I can pull in the tokens Dan's created and start using them to make some components. I'm going to do this by utilizing our custom Figma to theme tool to generate a theme for our project. A theme is essentially a format for storing a set of design tokens so that we can share them between libraries and projects. So first I add the UIKit link to the Figma to theme configuration file here so it knows where to find the tokens. This is the link Dan sent me. Then I just run the update theme command. This command is going to use the Figma API to open the UIKit file, extract our design tokens and use them to generate a theme for the UI library we're using, which in this case is Chakra UI. So now that the theme has been generated, I can open it and see that it's pretty simple. The theme files are just a JavaScript representation of all the tokens which were extracted from Figma. including the breakpoints, colors, custom icons, grids, and more. If I need to check these values at any time, I can simply open the file and take a look. However, reading through a text file isn't the best way to debug tokens, which are visual elements, and designers generally won't have easy access to this file. So as part of this work, we've also created some basic storybook stories, which will read our theme and display the tokens visually. So anyone who has access to the Storybook instance for the project can open it and preview the various design tokens which make up our project's theme. This provides a simple way for both developers and designers to see which token values are currently being used in the application. Having our theme exposed in Storybook opens up some other cool possibilities as well. We're currently working on the ability to edit tokens directly in Storybook or even apply an updated UIKit file so that we can preview how it would affect the look of the website without needing to make and deploy a code change. We've also added the ability to preview our project's text styles, including a breakdown of how each text style looks at each responsive breakpoint. Okay, now that we've imported the tokens from the UIKit file, we can start using them to build components straight away. Dan has sent me his screen design with the new card component, and I'm going to start coding it right in the middle of our generated homepage. If you're not familiar with the UI library we're using, don't worry, you should still be able to get the basic gist of what's happening. The purpose here is simply to show you how I can start pulling the tokens out of the designs and using them directly in my code. While I'm coding the component, anytime I come across a token in the design, I know I can simply reference that token in my code rather than needing to hard code the specific value. For example, I can see that the shadow on the component refers to our large shadow. So I simply type large to give the component the correct shadow. The same goes for our spacing, colors, media queries, text styles, and everything else. Previously, setting up these tokens in the code would have been a completely manual, relatively labor-intense, and sometimes error-prone process. And anytime a designer wanted to tweak the tokens, this would require another round of communication, manual changes to the code, and visual testing. With our UIKit integration, this process is almost completely automated. You can see that I'm also able to refer to the spacing annotations which Dan has placed in the design, so I know exactly which spacing tokens to use without needing to measure the distances myself. Using the text styles Dan has applied to the copy is as simple as selecting the text, noting the name of the text style, and then using that name directly in my code. Doing this, I can be confident that the text will have the exact typography styling that Dan is expecting it to have at every responsive breakpoint which has been defined for that text style in the Figma file. I can also see that Dan is using an icon from the popular React Icons library, which has been pre-installed by the Easy Scaffolding tool. All I have to do to pull in that icon is copy and paste the name, use it in my code, and I'm good to go. Now that the component is all done and I'm using the correct tokens, I can pull it up in Storybook to see how it looks. Great, I can see it looks just like the design. However, if I pull up Storybook's automated accessibility checker, I'm seeing that it's highlighting an issue. The contrast between the text and background of the header isn't quite meeting our accessibility standards. So I'm going to let Dan know that this needs some tweaking.
Thanks, Das. So obviously that kind of error is never something that we designers would do. We'd be testing before we hand over to our developers. But in those cases where it might slip through the cracks, it's just a really good way for us to demonstrate for everybody how simple it is for us to make kind of small iterative changes to these underlying design foundations, have them flow through all of our designs, and more importantly, flow through to the build. So Darcy's let me know that it's the card component that's got an issue, so I just need to kind of navigate to where that component lives in whichever design file and find that color and navigate through that link that goes back to the library, which is that instance of the UIKit. So you can see by clicking through that we've got that connection between the two. I can adjust that value and of course test it in normal circumstances. And then it's simply a case of going and publishing the updates to the library. We like to make a note of those changes so that we can keep a really clear log of all the changes throughout the project in case we need to roll back or refer to why design decisions were made. And when we switch back to the component itself, it's prompting us to let us know that there's an update to that UI kit. And when we accept that update, we can see the color change pulls through to the component itself. So at that point, all I need to do is let Darcy know that the change is made in the kit, and he'll be able to pull that through.
Thanks, Dan. So all I need to do to pull through the updated tokens and apply them to the application is to simply run that update theme command again. So once that command is finished, I should be able to refresh the page and immediately see the updated tokens. Great, now that I've refreshed, I can see the accessibility warning is gone because it's meeting the required standards.
Thanks so much, team. Darcy, Dan, Ash, for running us through that. It's really, I've been through this presentation a few times and seen it, but every time I'm just like, wow, it really is so much great thinking that's come through, and just to see it actually demonstrated technically is really incredible. So thanks so much for running through that, team. You did a great job. So coming back to some of those initial ways of working, the hope for this is not only for it to improve the efficiency by which we build digital products, but really enable us to work in some of those ways that we need, that I mentioned towards the beginning. So that is to solve real problems and spend less time duplicating processes means more time spent solving for the complex problems faced by our users. In collaboration, by automating some aspects of handover, developers can spend more time collaborating with designers and less time trying to decipher their designs. We can also streamline those error-prone feedback loops. And it ultimately allows us to deliver more value. It's about the execution of what we do. And that standard of quality jumps as a result of the time that this enables for us. There's more room to be adding more value in shorter amounts of time, which is a reality in the worlds that we work in. And, in turn, it reduces any focus on creating fundamentally new interfaces. So what's next on our roadmap? So as mentioned, the foundations are in there, but we're looking to build that out with components, as Ash mentioned. This is the MVP version, and we're going to continue to improve and extend it out to different front-end frameworks as well. So we want to explore the best way to incorporate those components without hampering our designers' flexibility and creativity. Look at how we can extend to other code frameworks and continue to evaluate this impact across the experience design team and development teams, and gather feedback and iterate and improve on it.
Actually, just to jump in, Joe, as well, and I think also as part of that roadmap, once we've had an opportunity to test and iterate a little bit more, we also want to make it fully open source, all of these things that we've built, and share it with the wider design and development community. So sharing the UIKit, but also some of the other tools that we've created as well, so that people can either use them or use them as inspiration for creating their own specific iterations of it.
Thanks, Ash. Yeah, so if you're watching this going, where can I get my hands on it? Stay tuned, stay connected with Portable through our newsletter, and we'll definitely let people know when that is available. So we want to reiterate that there's no one perfect way to do this kind of thing. We all operate differently in different contexts and teams, and we all use different tools. So we really invite you to be inspired by what we did, but do it in your own way, in your own context. But there are a few takeaways here that we think is going to make that a smooth process. So first is to foster that culture of continuous improvement with your team. Be open to questioning your practice, work with your leaders to find if there's a better way of doing things. Second is to look for mutual gains across disciplines. Build allies with your cross-disciplinary teams and try and find those efficiencies or improvements that can benefit everyone. The third is to leverage your existing tool set. So change is hard, and introducing new tools and processes in any team is difficult. But going where the energy is, using the tools that people are familiar or comfortable with, and trying to find a way of integrating those into the new process definitely makes it a lot easier. And finally, it's communicating that business value. Test your proposal, your ideas with your colleagues, your managers, and iterate on it until it's ready. Sometimes these things take time to get right. And I think it's really important for designers, developers, practitioners to learn to be able to communicate and work with the businesses that they're in. It's a valuable skill to have and to build. So that's it from us for today, from the formal part of the presentation. We really want to thank everyone for their attendance and for the chat. Thanks, it's great to see all the comments coming in the chat there. We have a few minutes now for some questions, and I think there may be some in the Q&A. So Olivia, did you want to throw some of those at us?
Yeah, thank you so much everyone for your comments in the chat. They're all so great, and for your questions as well. There is a question about whether it's something we communicate to clients, why or why not? And it might be different in different situations.
As in communicating like the use of this tool and process?
I can...
Yeah, jump in, Joe.
Yeah, well, one thing that came to mind in reading that question for me was really around giving them a sense of assurance that when we talk about best practice, like we have a foundation that we are building on that is research and evidence-based. So it's not just going on intuition of the designer or the research they were able to conduct within the scope of a project, but to be able to say, we've got this library that we're starting from, which has all this best practice accessibility, inclusive design, and just like good UX design principles baked into it, gives that client a lot more assurance that what they're getting from us is starting from that foundation. Does anyone else in the team have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's something that we're already starting to include in some of our proposals, and it just gives us a more a clearer way of articulating exactly how, like normally in our proposals we'll talk about the fact that we're going to be basing our work on best practice. We're going to be assuring quality. We're going to be, doing all of these things that are obviously really important to us, but also to our clients. This just gives us a really clear way of articulating how we're actually going to do that. And I think being able to, point to examples where we've used it as well, definitely really, it just means that we can be providing that confidence and that evidence to our clients, instead of just saying, hey, we're going to do it. It's like, hey, we're going to do it by, gives just more of an indication of how we're going to do it.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. There's an interesting question here. What's the best thing that the UIKit has resolved for you? What's been the best kind of benefit from it?
I would say that it probably is that moment that kind of got touched on by probably all of us today, where you're starting something new and you're looking to think about how you're going to approach one of those kind of foundational decisions, and you're no longer going through a process where you're reaching out to the team saying, hey, has anyone done this recently? Or you're digging through your old files to see, hey, have I done this recently? And you're sort of adapting something to the purposes of what you're faced with for that particular project. But rather that idea that you're coming straight into this nice, clean point of truth that everybody has bought into as a team, as an experience design team. So you know that if you take that and you work with that in the project, you're going to be able to collaborate with the rest of the team really clearly, because you'll all be speaking the same language and you'll all be using the same techniques and approaches. So for me, there's a lot of other things that I'm hoping the more we use this, the more benefit we'll see, but that's the thing I feel like is kind of happening already.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think for me, same, but I am personally really passionate about inclusive and accessible design, and I think having all of the ensuring that our designs are accessible and meeting all of the different standards and criteria that we need to meet can be really tough for people to get their head around some of those things. And I think having all of that guidance and documentation and all the things that we need to adhere to right there next to all of your design files in context of Figma, and being able to consider those things at, like, you know, sometimes when we think about accessibility, we often think about, you know, checking things once we've sort of gotten quite far into our design work, and sometimes even, you know, when we're getting ready to hand off to developers. But I think having it, getting people to think about accessibility and inclusive design right at the get-go from that foundational level, and that all of that information and guidance is there for the team, instead of having to go off and find it in other resources and other places, I think has been, I think that's been a really big one for me.
We probably have time for one more question. I know there's quite a few in the chat, so I really appreciate everyone asking some really great questions. But I think one that most people would be interested in is, how are we planning to maintain this ongoing without adding too much overhead to our busy agency lives?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. So, you know, as we mentioned, we obviously took a very much an MVP approach. So we've already got plans to be running more sort of mini sprints to be looking at different improvements and looking at different areas. But yeah, we've also made sure that we've put a few different things in place to help with as we sort of improve and iterate. So we've got some documentation, we've got a change log set up as well, where we can log the different updates and changes, and I guess a communication approach to communicating that really clearly with the team. We've got a backlog set up, which anybody in the design or development team can be putting suggestions, things that you know, are broken and need to be fixed, or, you know, ideas for future enhancements. You know, people have already started putting comments and suggestions in the actual Figma file, so we've got a way of sort of capturing, estimating and prioritizing that sort of stuff. So really, it's, for us, it's kind of an internal product. So, you know, we're looking at those continuous sort of improvement cycles, you know, to really be iterating and maintaining it. Yeah, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think as there's kind of this philosophy that we touched on around this idea of using the tools that we were already using and just figuring out a way to hang those together and be really smart with it. And I think similarly in terms of the way we're thinking about moving this forward is to look at the processes that already exist. So when we finish a project, we always will run a project retro, which many of you will be familiar with that process. And it's really important that if we've used the UIKit on a project, that we include it as a specific point of interrogation in the retro, and we ask the questions about how successful was it and what problems did it solve, but more importantly, like, where did it fall down? I'm really excited to be hearing things that have broken coming out in retros, so that we can make those the things that we can prioritize to improve.
Yeah.
A couple other points are coming to mind for me. I know, Dan, you've spoken about, you know, essentially using projects as a place to improve and to add new components and things to the kit as on an as needs basis. So we're starting a new project and there's new components, and we needed to conduct a bit of best practice research to make sure that what we're designing, you know, it meets the requirements. There's an opportunity there for us to essentially like create that or draft that in the UIKit, and then have the team sort of you know, discuss and approve that. As well as that, one of the things about agency life is that whilst we have really busy periods, we also have downtime and times where you know, certain team members might not have a lot of work coming through, and so having kind of a backlog of internal projects or products to be able to work on during those times is really useful and a great use of people's time in the business. Okay, well, we're just on time. Yes, so for anyone asking about the recording, we are going to post the recording at some point next week, and I believe that's going to be emailed out to all the attendees here, but it'll also be on our on the event page on our website. I just want to say a big thank you to, first off, all our guests and attendees who attended today for your great questions and discussions and interest in the work that we're doing. We hope you found it useful and inspiring. And huge thanks to Darcy, Ash, Dan, Olivia, for all their amazing work, not only on this presentation, but on building and making this UIKit a reality itself. Makes me really proud to be working in a team with such dedicated people who really care about what they do. Thanks everyone for attending. I hope you enjoyed it, and stay in touch, and yeah, enjoy the rest of your weeks.